So there's a significant backstory here that we need to understand to bring this from 300 words, just a quick note with some very short statements, into a three-dimensional understanding of the relationship between John and this church and the passion of the core of his message. So let's back up and just think about who John is for a moment. We have a sanitized view of John because we look at him through the filter of the book that he wrote, the Gospel, through his epistle, 1 John, through these two postcards, through the book of Revelations, and we see this great theologian, we see this great pillar of the church. But he didn't start that way. John was part of Jesus' inner circle, Peter, James, and John. James was his brother. They were known as the sons of thunder, probably because they had rather extroverted and in-your-face kind of personalities. If Jesus, in their mindset, when they were walking with Christ during his ministry on earth, if Jesus was going to be the king or the president of the kingdom of God, Peter wanted to be the CEO, and James and John wanted to have some other role. They were the ones that their mother argued, what seat will my sons have when your kingdom comes? Lord, can one sit on the right and the other one sit on the left? And I think John would have wanted the position of CDO, Chief Destruction Officer. Because in Luke chapter 9, it says, as Jesus is going in his ministry, he's going to enter a Samaritan village. In verse 51, it says, when the days grew near for him to be taken up, that is for Jesus to go to Jerusalem for that final week of his life, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. And he sent messengers ahead of him who went and entered a village of the Samaritans to make preparations for him. So he had an advance team. Go out and get things ready, and presumably lodging and some food, that kind of thing. But the people did not receive him because his face was set towards Jerusalem. There was this schism, this racial divide between the Samaritans and the rest of the Jews. And when they found out Jesus was just passing through to go to Jerusalem, they said, no, you're not welcome here. We don't care who you are, you're not welcome here. And when his disciples, James and John, saw it, they said, Lord, do you want us to send down fire from heaven to consume them? Let's just nuke them all, God. Let's just get rid of them. These people don't know who you are. They don't honor you. John was the chief destruction officer. So what greater apostle, what better apostle is there to be the one who receives the revelation of Jesus Christ? To receive these visions of what the end is going to look like, what it's going to be when the kingdom of God does come to earth. Well, John is the logical choice because he, from his very beginning, although misdirected, it was well intended, had this desire to see the kingdom of God come. And now in his later years, he's refers to himself in verse 1 as the elder. He's a respected leader in the early church. In fact, at this point, he's probably the only disciple of Jesus that's still alive. All of the others have died, most of them as martyrs. He has watched his brother be martyred. So instead of appealing to this church as John, the apostle of Jesus Christ, he's mellowed, he's softened, he's got a broader and a gentler understanding of the kingdom of God, and he appeals to them as the elder. He comes along as a person who has walked the journey with them, an elder, and he addresses the chosen lady and her children. Huge debate about what that means, but I think it's a reference, just an intimate way to refer to the church. He places together two ideas, truth and love. They are not separate ideas, but they are dependent on one another. They are interwoven together. So he starts at the very beginning saying, this is the church that I love in the truth. And not I only, but all who know the truth, because of the truth, which lives in us and will be with us forever. I think this is a reference to the relationship with God through Christ. The truth is not, John is not viewing that as a doctrinal statement or thesis that here is the definition of orthodoxy, and we are passionate for this because this lists the things of belief, but we believe. He's talking about the nature of who this Messiah is and what Messiah has done for us by being our Redeemer, by going to the cross. This truth of God in human form, of God coming and living and dwelling amongst us, Emmanuel. This truth is sourced in is an expression of love. So truth and love cannot be separated from one another. Again, we can struggle with that, where we see truth as being this objective set of facts. This is true. This is the definition of orthodoxy. It's very intellectual. And here's love, and it's very emotional. It's of the heart. This is of the head. But John sees both those things as being flip sides of the same coin. They're intertwined with one another. And now, dear lady or church, I'm not writing to you a new command, but one we've heard from the very beginning, that we love one another. That's a kind of an interesting transition. You're walking in truth, and now I want to remind you to love each other. And again, he's not setting up a dichotomy between here's truth and here's love. He's reminding them that the most loving thing we can do with one another and with God is to live and to be truthful. Not just truthful in the sense of being honest with one another, but as we understand what God has done for us through Christ, and we understand the full realm of his messiahship, that those truths saturate who we are, change who we are, so we can express our love to one another within that context. This is the foundation that transforms our worldview, our perspective, and our context for all of life. That Christ is on the throne, that Christ is the Son of God. Verse 5, and now, dear lady, I'm not writing you a new command, but one we have heard from the beginning, that we love one another. And this is love. What does it mean to love? Does it mean buying your sweetie flowers? Well, yes, sometimes. But there's a different definition, because he's not talking about romantic love here. He's talking about the kind of commitment that God has for us in sending his Son. And he says, this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. And Jesus said, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. Again, it's not rigidity of going through a checklist, defining this is orthodoxy, this is good doctrine, and I'm going to reduce this to a set of rules, and as long as I keep all these rules, I'm loving God. Sadly, that has been far too common in church history. He's not talking about that kind of love. He's talking about a passion that as we understand the relationship that God has made possible to reconcile us to himself through Christ, that consumes and redefines everything we are in the complete context of our life. And so we respond to him by keeping his commandments. And his commandments are summarized for us in the parables, the parable of the Good Samaritan, the story of the woman at the well, the teaching and the illustration we have of the thief on the cross, the demonstration of Jesus' grace and love to others, and yet always with an eye to see people reconciled to God. So this truth and this love is expressed by obedience. And this is probably the single most important idea that as followers of Jesus, we need first to solidify in our own minds, and then to make as the rule of thumb for how we engage with others. That Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, the Messiah. And you've heard me say it over and over again. Our mission in life is to represent Christ well. In fact, somebody said that, I can't remember who, one of our Q50ers in a recent conversation just used that phrase in the conversation, and as we represent Christ well. And I went, woohoo! Fantastic, because we're not about compliance to rules or maintaining the orthodoxy of a particular doctrinal perspective. If we are passionate to represent Christ well, to be submissive to his authority, loyal to his kingdom, dependent on him as the creator God who provides for us, all the other things, and we need to know what they are, and that's why Paul especially teaches about them, they will fall into their proper place. But the love we demonstrate for one another is the love we show by walking with each other in humility as we learn and we express the truth. Verse 9, anyone who runs ahead and does not continue in the teaching of the Christ does not have God, and whoever continues in the teaching that has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not take him into your house or welcome him. So are you saying, John, that we should not have relationships with people who in some way misrepresent Christ? Is that what he's saying? No, but if you just read this superficially, it sounds like, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, the solidarity in recognizing our shared human need versus separation, where we're so afraid of being tainted by sin, we isolate ourselves. It's not what John is talking about. Again, back in the first century, they didn't have Holiday Inn. They didn't have places where if you were traveling, you could just go and stay. You welcome people into your home, and by welcoming people into your home, you were affirming an affinity with that person, especially if they were an itinerant religious preacher, teacher of some sort. And in 3 John, it talks about those who go out for the sake of the name. So what John has in mind here are people who are saying, I am here to spread the gospel. I am here to preach the truth about who Jesus is, and yet they are misrepresenting him. And they are promoting this heresy, this form of Gnosticism. And John is saying, do not endorse them, do not facilitate their work, do not associate with them, because you are corrupting then your own faith, and you are bringing the gospel into disrepute. Verse 11, anyone who welcomes him shares in his wicked work. Those are powerful words, again, in a spirit of humility and of gentleness. Because what's at stake here is an understanding of the person of Christ, as we read in Psalm 47. The King of Kings, the Creator, the Redeemer, the one who came as a baby, who lived a sinless life, who died on the cross, who was raised the third day. He went back and sits at the right hand of God the Father. All of that is at stake. How dare we sully that? We must guard our understanding of Christ, that he is 100% God, 100% man. So having drawn his line in the sand, he also affirms again his passion and his love for these people. Verse 12, I have much to write to you, but I do not want to use paper and ink. Instead, I want to come and give you a hug. That's essentially what he's saying. I could send you an email, but it would be so much better if I could just hug on you. To visit, so my joy may be made complete. What kind of passion and intimacy and humility does that show from the elder? Not John the Apostle, who's taking all of his learned experience, the last guy standing who actually walked with Jesus, who was part of the inner circle, saw the transfiguration, had intimate knowledge of the life of Christ. And yet he doesn't use any of that to whack down this church and some within the church who are struggling with the identity of the Christ, attacking his best friend. And he says, no, you don't understand who this Jesus is.